So we have dived really deep into some aspects of the render phase, like the rules for render logic and how the keyprop works. But now let's take one step back and go back to one very important aspect of the first triggering phase, which is the fact that state updates are batched. So in that first lecture about how rendering works, we had this sentence, which says that renders are not triggered immediately. And so in this lecture, I want to focus on this part, which says that there is also batching of multiple setState calls. Now, as always, the easiest way of explaining difficult concepts is by using a small code example. So here we have three pieces of state defined using the useState hook, and we also have a button in the user interface. Then, whenever there is a click on the button, the event handler function named reset is called. In this function, the three pieces of state answer, best, and solved are basically reverted back to their original state. And therefore, this function is called reset. Now, actually, this is the part that interests us in this lecture. And so let's now focus only on the event handler function. Now, what I want to do here is to analyze how these three pieces of state are actually updated behind the scenes. So we might think that as React sees the setAnswer function call, it would update the state to the empty string as requested, and then trigger a re-render and the commit phase. Then it would move on to the next line and do the same thing again. And finally, do the entire thing one more time for the third state update. So intuitively, we would think that if there are three state variables being updated in this event handler, then React would re-render 3 times, right? However, this is actually not how it works. So this is not how React updates multiple pieces of state in the same event handler function. Instead, these state updates will actually get batched into just one state update for the entire event handler. So updating multiple pieces of state won't immediately cause a re-render for each update. Instead, all pieces of state inside the event handler are updated in one go. So they are batched. And only then will React trigger one single render and commit. And conceptually, it makes sense that React works this way, because if we're updating these pieces of state together, it probably means that they should just represent one new view, and therefore React only updates the screen once. So if these state updates belong together, it really wouldn't make much sense to update the screen 3 times. Doing so would also create 2 wasted renders, because we're not interested in the first 2 renders, only the final one, which already contains all the 3 state updates. Therefore, the fact that React automatically batches state updates in this way is yet another performance optimization that React gives us out of the box. Now, batching state updates is extremely useful, but it can also have surprising results. So let's turn our attention to this line of code now, where we reference the answer state variable right after updating it. So what do you think will be the value of this variable at this point? Well, let's try to think about this. So remember that component state is stored in the fiber tree during the render phase. Now at this point in the code, the render phase has not happened yet. So React is still reading the function line by line to figure out what state needs to be updated. But it hasn't actually updated the state yet, and it also hasn't re-rendered yet. That's the whole point of batching state updates in the first place, right? So what this means is that at this point of the code, the answer variable will still hold the current state, so the state before the update, even though we already told React to update it. So at this point, we say that our state is stale, meaning that the state is no longer fresh and updated. Because, in fact, a state update will only be reflected in the state variable after the re-render. And so, for this reason, we say that updating state in React is asynchronous. And again, it is asynchronous because React does not give us the updated state variable immediately after the setAnswer call, but only after the re-render has happened. Now, the same thing is also true whenever there is only one piece of state being updated. So, no matter how many state variables are being updated, the updated state is only available after the re-render, not immediately. Now, sometimes we actually do need the new value immediately after updating it. And in the case that we need the new value in order to update the same state again, or in other words, if we need to update state based on a previous state update in the same event handler, we can pass a callback function into the setState function instead of a single value. And we have actually done this in practice all the time, right? Now, so far we have only talked about batching in event handler functions like our reset function. That's because before React 18, React only did automatic batching in event handlers, but not in situations that happen after a browser event has already happened. However, there are certain very important situations in which we do need to update state long after a browser event, like a click, has happened. Examples of that are timeouts and promises. For instance, we might want to run our reset function only a second after a click event, or we might want to run it after some data has been fetched. So it would be nice to also have automatic batching in those situations to improve performance, right? Well, that's actually one of the important features that React 18 gave us. So before React 18, if this reset function was called by a timeout or by a promise, state updates inside the function would not be batched. Instead, in these situations, React would actually update the state variables one by one, and therefore, in this case, render 3 times. Now, another case is handling native events using DOM methods such as addEventListener, where state updates also used to not be batched, but now they are. So again, if you're using the latest React version, you will now get automatic batching all the time, everywhere in your code. And if, for some reason, you're working with an older version of React, maybe at your work, it's important that you know that batching used to work in a different way before version 18. Now, there are also some extremely rare situations in which automatic batching can be problematic. So if you ever find yourself in a situation like that, you can just wrap the problematic state update in a React DOM.flushSync function, and React will then exclude that update from batching. But you will most likely never need this. I'm just mentioning this here so that you know that it exists. Okay, and that's it about state update batching. It turned out to be a bit longer than I thought, but as always, there's just so much interesting stuff to learn, and so I hope that you don't mind at all. But in any case, let's quickly go to the next video so I can show you some of this in practice.